A very, very warm welcome to Corin Swan.
Hello. I'm going to give, I don't know if it's a lecture or performance or a poem, but it's just 15 minutes, so I'll let you know. During the building of a forest access road near Brackadale on the Isle of Skye, a hand-carved wooden bow was recently found. It seems that the bow was originally cut from alder between the 1st and 2nd century AD. Quite quickly, it must have fallen into a break in the peaty ground. Left in the open air, it would have deteriorated quite rapidly, but peat preserves would. So instead of disintegrating and being subsumed into the surrounding soil, it sat, submerged in the slow-growing turf for the last 1,500 years or so. Now the bowl sits in the Skye and Loch Allish Highland Archive. It has been photographed and its image appears anywhere in the world that it is requested. Having been frozen for over a century, it now circulates the world over, yet still without having to move at all. The day that I first saw it, I was in Vancouver, preparing for a residency in northern Scotland. Earlier in the afternoon, I'd been on the SkyTrain, and I'd overheard, or purposely listened to, the conversation of two men talking irritably. They were talking about identity theft and how odd the term was for what it denoted. One of them had a canvas bag that rested on the floor, and he held its strap in one hand. The other wore scuffed canvas trainers, and he leaned against a metal railing. This one scoffed that identity theft was a misnomer, that identity was not to be found in the numbers of your bank account, in your credit rating, nor in whether somebody had falsely used your name and credit card at a motel in Portland, 420 miles away. Where Main Street meets Stadium Avenue, there's a section of SkyTrain track that runs through a building. I believe that the building must have been built up around the track after its completion. It's a reflective glass building, very common to Vancouver, and as we passed through it, I used its surface to look obliquely at the speakers' faces. The one holding the bag, It seems that their conversation stemmed from an article that held front page of the Metro that day. This is a Vancouver version of the same daily newsprint that circulates the globe over. It turns out that the article concerned a young couple who had left their camera on the back seat of their car. From there, it had been stolen. And it contained all of their recent photographs from a trip to Brazil. The man holding the bag pointed out sarcastically that the journalist was fixated on the theft of these photographs. It seems that the author had tried to build a sentimental pathos around the loss of these images, reconfiguring them not as pictures at all, but rather as a sunny nook stolen from the young couple's mind. I looked out of the SkyTrain window. The view was of a viaduct that crosses a railroad track and then becomes a highway. Then I looked down at the seat next to me at a discarded Metro. The front page headline read, "They stole our memories." But I'm actually not all that interested in the headline of the paper. I tell you this story because it reflects on another incident, something else that occurred to me as I walked along a beach on that residency that I later took on the northeast coast of Scotland. On the beach, the sun was very low, and the ocean stretched off uninterrupted and endless. Its expanse exceeded any fixed conception in the mind. And yet, as I walked, a small collection of ideas appeared. Starting small, they expanded like the shade of a cloud across the beach and running up and along the side of the hill. I wandered out across the gray dunes, and I could hear the waves breaking as I approached them. The day was not welcoming, but the ocean was mesmerizing. I stood on the shore and I succumbed to the falsely infinite potential of the sea. It triggered a spree of perceptions that reached out and danced off in wonder. One thought evoked another, and then each was lost in an expanse of dazzlement. Well, not really. In fact, very quickly I moved on. It was very cold on the beach, and I'm a rather impatient person. But I wanted to return to the image. I wanted to return to this moment in the sea and the ability to think a magnificent collection of disappearing thoughts. So I thought I would try and take a picture. I thought that I might be able to capture this moment as an experience to return to. But as quickly as the idea came to mind, even without having taken the picture, I realized that I had seen the image before. There are thousands of these ocean snapshots. They surge in uploads and disappear in gradual computer discard. They're easily found with image searches such as endless ocean, expansive sea, little lost boat. Nevertheless, I set my phone to video and I held it just about the height I would, binoculars, but further out from my body. I hovered it along the distant horizon like a little ship would trace its course. I shifted my body weight from one foot to the other, and I recorded the view. And in doing so, I had just taken about 2,000 images in a minute of video. And if I were to upload these images, either still or moving, where would they go? And this wave now receding from the beach, will it too shift and move across the Earth's surface? Will it appear at another beach somewhere else where someone else will take its picture? And if so, are we all taking pictures of the same sea? Some waves last 8 years long, so it could be me who rephotographs this wave that's receding now. Perhaps I will have just bought a stolen camera at a market, perhaps brought there by a thief who only steals recording devices in order to retrace the paces of their former owners. The current here moves up the east coast of Scotland, across the north of Russia, through the islands of Nunavut, and then south past Labrador, where some of it will branch off and pass across the equator to travel along the eastern coast of South America. The water that travels most broadly across the globe is surface current. This only makes up about 10% of the ocean, its upper 400 meters, but it's likely that most of this wave will have long dispersed or evaporated before it arrives in Brazil. And it is quite impossible that the water I look at now could figure in any of my future photographs. There are other currents, though, deep submarine rivers, but nobody knows how these travel. In turn, I have very little understanding of how material circulates through the channels of the internet. Some time ago, I downloaded a recent release. It was called Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. It had recently been shot in a cinema and then badly compressed. So badly compressed that for most of the film it appeared as little more than an undulating pixel ocean. But still, I made an image of it. I made a story of it. At one point, a white mass near the center of the screen seethed and grew, and then it shrank into a sea of purple. This purple was a night mosaic of pixels that blinked and faded and blinked and faded. There was so little definition, and yet still, I believed that the white mass was a candle taken at night down to a river or marsh. I believed that it was dangerous, and I thought this because the music was ominous. I heard footsteps, one step, maybe two, and rustling. Then the music grew louder. There were yelps, heavy breathing, and then nothing. The screen was black, and all that was left was the sound of rustling. But the rustling was most likely the sound of the original audience, trapped in this now virtual cinema and projected through computers across the world. When I first saw the film, I didn't think about all the strangers in that cinema who shared my experience with me. I didn't think about where the original space was, and I can't conceive of where all the places the footage is now. But there's no necessity to knowing where something goes in order to get there. In the 16th century, Portuguese sailors sailed to the Canary Islands from the Iberian Peninsula, propelled with the wind behind them. But the journey with the very same wind against them was far more complicated. In order to return, the ships would sail away from the wind that arrived on and find another. Hence, they would arrive on one system and leave on a different one. This double conveyor belt was called the Volta Del Mar, and it was a miniature replica of the wind circuit that brought these same sailors to the east coast of North America to hunt whales and back again. Here, they sailed out on the trade winds and back on the westerlies. To some extent, this is chance. I read somewhere that it is doubtful that the Portuguese sailors that used this system to travel the expanse of water between the Canaries and Portugal considered the Volta in any sort of formal way. It is improbable that they learnt the technique as a principle. Rather, prevailing patterns of thought grew to match prevailing winds. As I looked at the front cover of the Vancouver Metro, the two men who had been talking got off the SkyTrain. I don't know what station it was, and I don't know where they went. I was thinking about my friend Anna, who had recently had her identity stolen in the way the men had been referring to. She was presently in discussion with the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade in an attempt to get it back. The Metro is distributed in 63 cities throughout the world. Each day, 44 million are published, and although these use 70% recycled paper, the total print run still requires 11,314 felled trees. I've heard that the most environmental damage is not done by the felling of these trees, nor by the accumulation of the 100 tons of waste paper left each day. Rather, the damage is done through a complicated process of managing maintenance and erasure. It's the chemical wash that's used to make all the pages blank again before they are reused. And the ancient alder bowl found on the Isle of Skye, how has it changed in representation? In what form does it now move from place to place? I misled you when I said that I could clearly see the ancient wooden bowl on the Highland Council's website. For in fact, the object is largely obscured by a watermark which has been digitally embossed across the center of the image and most of the bowl. I suppose this watermark asserts the copyright of the photograph which represents the bowl. But it seems strange that the mark should obscure the image's sole purpose, that of presenting the artifact. And it seems particularly strange that the assertion of a mark legally protecting authorial expression should inhibit the visual display of an object whose authorship is so entirely untraceable. A further irony lies in the fact that in order to get to my computer in the first place, the image is made into various copies, sent as packets of information, and then refashioned on my screen, so wherever I'm looking at it, I see an unauthorized and illegal copy of the work. The SkyTrain stopped again. I looked out of the window, and I watched vaguely as a woman approached. But then her way was eclipsed by a pillar. She moved out of view, and then somehow she never passed by.